Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar about cognition smart data with an emphasis on water. I am Sarah Gutterman, the CEO of Green Builder Media, and I will be presenting today's webinar. I encourage you to chat in any questions that you may have. I'll leave time at the end to answer those questions. So please just use the chat function in the GoToWebinar box that's on your screen, and we'll try to get to those today at the end of the webinar. First, I'm going to start off with just a little bit of context about Green Builder Media. Hopefully, most of you know who we are, but just as a reminder, and as some, again, context for those who aren't familiar with us, Green Builder Media is the nation's leading media company focused on green building and sustainable living. We have a robust spectrum of media and communications channels, including our flagship publication, Green Builder Magazine, which just won Best Trade Publication for the 7th year in a row, which we're really happy about. And then, of course, a whole spectrum of online, mobile, digital, and social media. Through our communications channels, we reach a hybrid trade and consumer audience, so about 200,000 of the most progressive building professionals across the U.S. and millions of early adopter and first mover consumers. Because our audience is on the leading edge, we have a little bit of a crystal ball, so to speak, when we gather metadata from them and when we survey them and get information about calls to action. So it's a really important tool for us to be able to do the predictive analysis that we engage in and execute, because where our audience is today is really where the mainstream market is heading in the next 6, 12, 24 months. Additionally, we do demonstration projects, live events, and then last but certainly not least, we have cognition smart data. And I'm going to delve a little bit into what cognition is so that you can, again, understand the context for today's webinar and the data that we're collecting about key topics like water. So cognition smart data is our market intelligence and data services. We generate data through 2 proprietary technology platforms. The first one, we actually found some former IBM Watson guys to build us a proprietary technology platform that uses artificial intelligence and the logic of Watson to mine web and social media-based content using contextual filters and parameters that we have created to go really, really deep and vertical into the building sector, into sustainability, into sustainable living and development, so that we can get really refined data about high-level market trends all the way through to granular customer behavior, purchasing patterns, sentiment, etc. We then marry that with data that we generate through a different technology platform that we have that mines metadata on our audience, so we can track likes, engagement patterns, what people read, what they download, etc., as well as information that they give to us in the context of surveys and calls to action. So when we marry those 2 pieces of data together, as you can imagine, we get a really robust perspective and comprehensive understanding of the marketplace. So I just went through what we call the macro and the micro sources of data that feed cognition. So through cognition, again, we're able to generate these incredible insights that allow us to analyze things ranging from brand comparison to keyword sentiment to understanding how brands and products and topics are being talked about in different source feeds, so different types of media and different audience groups, which is really interesting for audience segmentation. We can break all of that down by geography and really provide some pretty interesting insights, both to ourselves and our internal team, as well as to our clients. And then again, we're able to drill down into that user-specific data so that we can look at behavioral patterns, purchasing preference, content tracking, and things like that. So we call cognition full spectrum visibility because not only do we generate the data, which is really proprietary market intelligence, through those two tech platforms. We then are able to use our domain expertise to convert the data into actionable and meaningful insights and informed business recommendations for our clients that we're able then to help them apply to marketing, increasing the efficacy of their sales, product development, strategic business decisions. We even work with some clients on looking at M&A activity and new growth opportunities in different audience or geography markets and segments. Then we convert the data into content marketing, custom content generation, super informed marketing campaigns that yield specific deliverables and quantifiable results in the form of KPIs and a tangible ROI for our clients. So just wanted to run through that quickly so that, again, you can understand the power of cognition and how we're actually generating the data that I'm going to be presenting, starting right now. So let's shift first, before we get into specific water trends and topics and data. I want to just talk about a couple of the key housing market trends that we are tracking through cognition. And this is pretty interesting because there are certain things that we thought we knew just by being a media company and really keeping our finger on the pulse of market trends. But now through cognition, we're actually able to very specifically track proof points and data related to some of these key housing market trends. So now we know that we know what these key housing market trends are, and we're able to do really deep dives into all of these topics and many more. So let me start with water, of course. That's why we're here today. So water is the mitigating factor in the building industry because, as I like to say, if there is no water, there are no permits. And if there is no water, there's no manufacturing. And if there is no water, there's no community development. And you get the drift there. So what we're seeing is that the water-related issues, which are really the #1 topic of our moment, right? We've kind of already solved for energy. Energy was the topic, let's say, of the last decade, both in terms of efficiency and renewables. Water is really the most urgent topic of our moment. We're also seeing movement in some other areas that I'll talk about in just a second. But I would say solving for water is, again, the most critical thing that we need to do as a society, as an industry. And because of that, because of water scarcity, because of quality and quantity issues and concerns, that's really placing new demands on the building industry, on manufacturers, on builders, on developers, and ultimately it will continue to place increasingly more stringent demands on homeowners. And unless we solve for some of these water issues at the community infrastructure scale, at the municipality infrastructure scale, and then at the point of use with innovative technologies, then the homeowners are going to be more and more kind of water stressed, we'll say. So that's why it's so important that we solve for water issues up the value chain. And so we're going to start seeing much more stringent water policy, more comprehensive water programs and mandates, and perhaps most importantly, increased water pricing. So I'll go into all of that in just a minute, you know, in the kind of meat and bones of this webinar today. We're also seeing an exploding demand for healthy homes. So health and wellness is way beyond just a trend or a movement. It's really top of mind for a lot of homeowners. Last week I did a webinar on indoor air quality, and what we're seeing with respect to IAQ is that it's shifted from a nice to have to a necessity across most homeowner and home buyer segments. And in fact, some home buyer audience segments tell us that it is as important as location. And that's really important because that was not the case, you know, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. With respect to water, that health and wellness interest translates into leak detection, mold, mildew, humidity sensing, and things like that. So there's actually a really direct connection between this increased demand for health and wellness and water innovation technologies. Boomers and Gen Xers are looking at technologies that are going to help either themselves or their parents age with grace and age in place. Millennials and the Gen Zs are looking for connected living technologies that are rooted in this environmental ethic that those generations have, but then of course they're so comfortable with technology, they want everything to be connected and streamlined. So a huge opportunity again to connect innovative technologies, water technologies, with health and wellness and this demand for healthy homes. I'm gonna come back to that riff a couple of different times throughout the course of this webinar, because the connection between technology and again, health and wellness and sustainability is really important at this time. Of course, we're seeing a rapid transformation to net zero energy. We're seeing municipalities, even states like California and New York, adopt programs and mandates that are going to push net zero energy in homes and buildings through probably faster than most people expect. The reason why I'm bringing this up on today's webinar that is focused on water is because as homes and buildings are designed for and retrofitted for energy, it's a great opportunity for manufacturers and builders and developers to also integrate in water technology. As people are thinking more about net zero energy, that's also going to expand into net zero water and other net zero applications, net zero carbon, net zero waste, et cetera. And so we're going to see this concept of net zero, which is really exploding in the energy sector, transform into other key sectors as well. And then another important element is that the valuation metric for homes is changing from first cost or price per square foot to full cost. We have clearly seen that green homes and buildings yield a meaningful ROI. They reduce ongoing operations and maintenance costs. We're seeing a lot more homes and buildings with third-party certifications, or they're listed on green MLSs, and they're actually selling for higher price points, faster. So there are many, many proof points now that have been amassed over the last decade that's really shifting valuation metrics specifically for homes, commercial buildings as well. But that's clearly yielding a value for builders that are building with full cost in mind and with sustainability in mind, because they're able to now prove out the fact that first cost is no longer an appropriate valuation metric for homes. Within the consumer market, we're seeing a tremendous amount of consumer pull for greener, healthier, more sustainable, more efficient water and energy homes. So the first line here under market pull, consumers specify products up to 70% of the time. That's really important, because when we first started surveying our audience 15 years ago, it was really the builders and the architects who specified products most of the time in most categories. However, fast forward to today, you can see there is a shifted dynamic there, and not only are consumers involved in purchasing decisions a majority of the time, but they're also specifying products for most building categories, right? So again, 10 years ago, it was the builder or the contractor or installer specifying the insulation and the siding. Today, consumers are playing a role in categories that they just didn't used to have any input into. And there are certainly times when builders or contractors specify, insulation or windows or things like that. But again, the involvement of consumers in actually purchasing and specifying products is important, especially in an area like water, where many of the water-related technologies in a home are low-flow fixtures. They're leak detection and water monitoring systems. They are gray water systems that consumers are very much getting involved with. The next bullet point, 50% of consumers want net zero energy homes and are willing to spend up to $9,000 in products that will increase energy efficiency, water conservation, and health of homes. I actually took that stat from the National Association of Home Builders. That was a survey that they conducted, but I thought it was a worthwhile note to point out. Clearly, consumers are actively purchasing and spending money on products that will save them in terms of that full cost, save them money on utilities, and that's for energy and water, again, especially because we're going to see higher and higher pricing that frankly is more appropriate for water. And so those water utility bills are going to increase. So anything that we can do today to help mitigate what is inevitably going to happen with increases in water pricing that will trickle down to the homeowner will ultimately end up benefiting that homeowner. So there's a whole new frontier for smart, sustainable, automated, connected, and affordable. Clearly, price is still important. Products and technologies that improve the efficiency of homes. And then, as I mentioned earlier, all of these innovations, all of the water issues, the energy issues that our market is dealing with, are placing new demands on building professionals. And we're just continuing to see more and more that building professionals are using sustainability as a differentiator. Clearly, many builders across the country have bought into energy efficiency. Many are now, buying into renewables. Some are being mandated and they just don't have a choice, like in California. But again, we're going to start seeing more of that in the water space as well. And so building professionals are responding to enhance value and increase their own revenues, and responding to consumer demand and changing codes. And, just being more innovative in the way that they are approaching the built environment in their projects. Another key housing market trend is labor shortages. And I would just be remiss if I didn't mention this because it is such a big issue that the industry is struggling with. And the reason why I've included this slide, and I'm talking about this on a water webinar, is that what we're starting to see more and more is that manufacturers are actually designing products that address labor issues, right? They have streamlined installation processes. They are built so that it reduces not just the installation time, but maybe the number of contractors that actually have to touch a product upon install. And so there's a lot of innovation that's happening right now to specifically address those labor issues that happen in the field on the front end of product development. And then the other thing that I think is interesting here with respect to water technology that's tied to labor issues is that clearly our existing labor force in the building industry is aging rapidly, and we're just not seeing yet as much of an entry from the millennial and Gen Z age ranges, well, more millennials since they're more age appropriate, but then we are seeing a departure from the older generations. And so the way that we're talking with a lot of our clients about solving for that generational labor issue is that by talking with the millennials about, sexy technology solutions, and again, I think water technology falls into that category of innovative technology that would be attractive to recruit younger generations into the building industry that are looking for something that is more high tech. They're looking for high paying, high tech jobs and solutions for their careers. And so I think that there's a connection to be made there by companies in the water technology space that can be very attractive to those younger generations. Now, let's shift into some of the key water trends that we're seeing. I just want to start off, I think everyone on this call, on this webinar knows the importance and the urgency of our water issues. But again, I would be remiss if I just didn't touch on a few of the global and then national trends. So by 2025, 2/3 of the global population will live in water-stressed areas. And that is really because our changing climate, water pollution, weather events, drought, flooding, and then weak governance in combination, of course, with rising water consumption on a global scale is really stressing, the global water supply. So and unfortunately, Even with innovative water technology hitting the market, the global demand for water is predicted to increase by 55%, between 2000 and 2050. And if we stay on today's glide path, we will have an inefficient water supply in most parts of the world due to the combination of population growth and, just lack of water quality and quantity. So the thing that will solve for this is, one, innovative technology; two, enhanced governance, codes, regulations, policies; three, as I mentioned, especially here in the U.S., appropriate water pricing; and then four, water programs, which we'll go into in a minute. But clearly this is a global issue. However, for the bulk of this webinar, I am going to focus on the national, water situation. So again, national demand for water reflects the global demand for water, and clearly areas like the Southwest and the West are already struggling tremendously. Unfortunately, that the national population trend continues to grow in water-parched areas like Nevada, Arizona, Texas, California, Colorado. 100% growth is predicted in Nevada, Arizona, Texas. So these are really key markets for anyone in the water space to target with innovative water solutions. And again, most of these areas are already starting to explore enhanced water mandates, regulations, programs, water pricing structures. They're starting to adopt performance-based water programs like WERS and HERS H2O into code. I'll talk some more about those in a minute. And then they're also requiring increased reporting and drought contingency plans for municipalities. And then, of course, we're also dealing with water quality issues, as we've seen with Flint as just the tip of the iceberg. But our dilapidated infrastructure is also going to cause some major problems. Again, we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're seeing on a national scale with respect to water quality. In terms of the building industry, I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, water is the top area of focus for anyone in this industry because it's potentially the #1 limiting factor to growth, both with respect to permits and building and new growth, as well as existing communities, and just manufacturing as well. And, interestingly, while water is a global crisis, it's inherently a local issue, right? So what we're going to see is that I mentioned that water's placing more demands on builders and developers. And so we're going to start seeing requirements for builders and developers to look at things like water use, water footprint, monitoring, leak detection, recycling, reuse, water discharge. And we're going to see that there's going to be more stringent requirements at the point of permitting for those water plans so that each project, each community can address those local kind of unique water issues as governed by local municipalities. We're going to start seeing more requirements for site water targets and net zero water targets. And so builders and community developers are going to be required, and they're already starting to be required to look at water risk and how they can reduce that water risk in terms of everything, again, from quality to quantity, ecosystems, how those communities can respond appropriately with respect to resiliency and extreme weather events and other climate impacts. Since this webinar is geared for manufacturers, I also just wanted to point out, the material risk for businesses of our water issues. The UN reported that that global companies had actually reported 14 billion in annual water-related impacts. So those are, water-related issues either that affected operations, manufacturing, supply chain issues. And so because of these climate issues, because of the stress that water shortages, extreme climate events are putting on supply chains, on, again, facilities, operations. Water is just going to become more uncertain, right? We've always kind of counted on the fact that you turn on the tap and there's water there. So at a home level, at a business level, at a municipality level, there's going to be less certainty there. Now, shifting into a consumer survey that we conducted of just global risks of highest concern, the water crisis is actually the top area of concern for our consumer audiences. Now, granted, this is a leading edge, early adopter, and first mover audience, but what the water crisis, more so even than the failure to adapt to climate change, extreme weather events, food crises, social instability, water clearly topped the highest concerns in terms of those global risks. And so this is an issue that people are aware of, they're paying attention to, and so there's a unique opportunity for manufacturers to create products and solutions that solve for the water crisis and communicate accordingly. When we look across audience segments at purchase drivers, this is pretty interesting because we start seeing things like water security, certainly sustainability, home comfort, and wellness. Those are kind of, some expected water-related purchase drivers. Energy efficiency is actually the #2 purchase driver in here, which I think is pretty interesting because, we talk a lot about the nexus between water and energy and how closely related the energy production and water use are. But what's interesting when we look across audience segments is that they get that nexus between water and energy. And so again, with respect to understanding water technology purchase drivers, having the water security in their homes, having comfort and wellness, having a sustainable home through water conservation, all of those things are important, but also, as manufacturers are creating products and messaging about that, I would not shy away from talking about that nexus between water conservation and energy efficiency. And then ease of use is also in here. Wanted to point that out, which I think really plays into some of the water technologies that we're seeing around leak detection, water monitoring, gray water, et cetera. Just in terms of, that is not always a purchase driver that comes up in different segments that we look at through cognition, but it is definitely one that is related to water technology. As we look at those purchase drivers by audience segment, and we track different audience segments in the building sector, we track segments like production builders versus progressive builders versus architects versus commercial contractors versus HVAC contractors, et cetera, solar installers and suppliers, et cetera. On the consumer side, we track segments like active adults, millennials, DIY consumers, et cetera. In the water space, DIY consumers are the most active on the web and in social media with respect to water technology and water-related purchase drivers. So again, since this webinar is specifically directed at our manufacturer partners, I'm sharing this point of reference so that you can understand that the DIY segment is really important with respect to purchasing water technologies and messaging about water technologies. So for elevated web and social media engagement, that's a good segment of the market to focus on. We track keywords and queries through Cognition, and so you can see here a list of some of the top keywords, water-related keywords that we're tracking, everything from water use and efficiency to is gray water illegal to certainly leak detection and smart irrigation. Again, we can kind of track these by geography as well. So I just kind of put up here a handful of water-related terms. The deeper the concentration of the blue color, the more queries and searches there are. So for example, in the top row, in the middle, water use is clearly an important topic that people are talking about and looking at and querying about across the country. Whereas interestingly, if we look at water efficiency, it's not quite as concentrated across the whole country. It's kind of on the two coasts. Leak detection, clearly a hot and growing area in most states. Water harvesting and gray water as well, getting a lot of attention across the entire country. So as we look at cognition data, as we kind of correlate keywords, queries, just content itself that we get from web and social media and different media and source feeds, as we combine that with the survey information and call to action data that we generate from our audience, there's some really important trends and innovations that we're watching with respect to water. Clearly, water conserving and low flow plumbing fixtures directly connected with WaterSense and then appliances as well is of primary importance when we talk about water and water conservation and water innovation in homes. Leak detection and water monitoring systems that learn the footprint of each of the devices in the home. And when I say devices, I mean faucets and toilets and, shower heads, et cetera. And that proactively, alert a homeowner when it senses a leak or it senses increased water usage. Or actually on the flip side, in applications like, for example, for assisted living technology, if water has not been turned on or toilets have not been flushed, they can be those technologies can be programmed to send alerts. That's an exploding marketplace that we're seeing with respect to market demand and the cognition data that we're tracking. Gray water systems as well, it's not as explosive in terms of market growth as leak detection and water monitoring systems, but it's absolutely growing in terms of market demand. Fortunately, we're starting to see some movement with respect to corresponding changes and enhancements, frankly, in codes across the country as well. Smart irrigation is also a high growth area, rain and roof water capture. Interesting innovative technologies like atmospheric generators. These are kind of lower on the scale with respect to, kind of this explosion in water demand, but we're starting to see more and more chatter about technologies like atmospheric generators, which pull water out of the air. They're used more in island applications that have moist climates. They're a little bit less appropriate for arid climates, desert climates, et cetera, but they're really good for moisture climates. We're starting to see a rise in conversations around water meters that have auto or remote shutoffs, again, kind of tied to that leak detection concept. And then, groundwater recharge products like permeable pavers and permeable concrete. I want to take a minute and talk specifically about sensors and monitoring systems because in many categories, whether it's energy, water, or indoor air quality, sensors and monitoring systems are probably the most talked about area with respect to these different categories. And specifically, these are sensors and monitoring systems that provide real-time observation and reporting. They're proactive systems, so I just talked about this a little bit, where they learn the water usage, or they're pre-programmed to understand water usage for each, kind of water device in the home. They send alerts and notifications to homeowners, but then they also have interconnectivity with other devices. Now, in the indoor air quality segment, for example, this may be an IAQ monitor that is connected to a vent fan or a range hood or even windows that either turn on or open when poor IAQ is sensed. In the water space, we're seeing more connections, again, with central home water monitoring and leak detection systems that connect the devices with the meter or with the water lines, but we may start seeing a kind of more advanced applications where actually water monitoring systems may ultimately tie into IAQ systems to measure moisture, mold, mildew, humidity in a home. And again, that can help maybe track leaks and then make the home as intuitive and proactive as possible. And that's really where we're seeing this exploding demand with respect to connected living and the increased discussion in web and social media around sensors and monitoring systems. Even in areas that touch into mechanical systems and some other areas that might not always be quite as directly correlated or as intuitive. I mentioned, the rapid change in water policy and regulation. So on a federal level, to be honest, there's not a ton of movement given the current administration's lack of focus on these types of policies. However, fortunately, on a state level, we are seeing a tremendous drive towards water efficiency, net zero water. California is always the harbinger of, progressive policy across the country. They want to limit water use to 55 gallons a day by 2050. As a point of reference, Santa Fe currently has the lowest daily per capita water usage in the country. That's at 87 gallons per day. One of the next lowest per capita water users is Las Vegas. That's at 200 gallons per day. So California's per capita water usage at 55 gallons is really aggressive. And we're starting just to see more policy and ordinances across the country on a state level. At a municipality level, Santa Fe is a great case study. I won't go into full detail here, but probably about 10, 15 years ago, Santa Fe stepped forward, really driven by need and necessity, to create a really innovative water program, including a water bank where builders and developers could buy water credits as they were building new communities. They did a really innovative toilet take-back program where they actually provided low flow and dual flush toilets to homeowners to actually drive business for plumbers and contractors. So they gave away the toilets for free, and then they have really stringent water use requirements as well as water pricing. They actually have the highest water prices in the country, and correspondingly, as I mentioned, the lowest daily per capita water usage. But this water innovation is expanding quickly. The Front Range in Colorado, we're starting to see aggressive water requirements, net zero requirements. We're starting to see the integration of advanced and sophisticated water technology in terms of incorporating data programming into planning processes and really kind of leveraging technology to understand the long-term water use before any permits are given. We're already starting to see increased water pricing. We're actually doing a community with Thrive Home Builders, a medium-sized builder in the Front Range of Colorado in Fort Collins. That's where our community is, 498 home community, and basically Thrive has to show a really aggressive approach to water in order to get the community permits, and the tap fees, pricing fees are just exorbitant. So we're really trying to solve for water through technologies like low flow, leak detection and monitoring systems, gray water systems, et cetera, so that we can help to actually mitigate those tap fees. And so we're seeing the proliferation of that across the country, and then also the incorporation of water-related programs, which again I'll get into in just a second. And then interestingly, we're starting to see water-related moratoriums in places like Bainbridge Island, Washington. That's the island right off of Seattle, just to the west of Seattle. Moist climate, so this is an island surrounded by water. You wouldn't think that they would have a water-related moratorium, but they have. They've had a moratorium on any new building permits because of water quantity issues. We are starting to see changes in codes, again, on a national and state and local level. So just in the 2021 cycle alone, we're starting to see a lot of water-related code changes. Here's just a list of the water-related proposals. Some of these have been approved. Some of them were disapproved in the last round of voting. That does not mean that they won't get approved with some amendments the next time folks vote, which I think is occurring later this month. And so, again, water is continuing to be incorporated into codes. Some of these codes, like, for example, with some of the flex points proposals, if you're familiar with those, the proposals got disapproved because of the energy-related components, not the water-related components. So, but it's still important to note that water-related codes are being or proposals are being introduced, and in some cases are being unanimously approved. And clearly the future of water is zero, right? Here's a definitive and important business opportunity. We really believe that the curve for net zero water will follow that of net energy. So we always recommend to our manufacturer partners that you start looking for the water raters, just like the energy raters. And start getting engaged with some of the water programs. Again, I'll talk about that in just a second. And really start looking at the municipalities, the locations that are requiring offset programs, looking at net zero demand mandates, and focusing on those markets as you're introducing innovative water technologies and solving for water. And then again, another key element is that water pricing, because as we're seeing increased water pricing, we're seeing just challenges that stall or in some cases thwart the permitting process. So we're just starting to see builders and developers kind of being forced by necessity into thinking about water in an entirely different way, which again is really a huge opportunity for manufacturers in this space. Water programs, I've mentioned these. Here's just an overview of the kind of leading water programs. WERS, Water Efficiency Rating System. This was actually created through a partnership by the Green Builder Coalition, which is actually a sister entity of ours. We had the HBA in New Mexico and New Mexico municipality, Santa Fe municipality, involved in the development of WERS. It's a performance-based approach to residential water efficiency. It's been around in the marketplace for about 2.5 years and being adopted into municipalities across the country as a part of their compliance path. And actually it's being added to a compliance path on a national scale to a green building program in Canada. And it covers single-family, multifamily, new and existing properties and looks at all aspects of water use. There's HERS H2O, which is being created by ResNet. And ResNet is partnering with the ICC to create an ANSI standard for this performance-based approach to water efficiency. It covers single-family and duplex properties, and it looks at indoor and outdoor usage, but it doesn't address capture and reuse at this time. We stand, again, prescriptive approach to residential water efficiency. It's also been in the marketplace for a little over 2 years, almost 3 years now. It covers single-family and multifamily properties and looks at most aspects of water use as well. Then there's Florida Water Star, which is, kind of one of the granddaddies of the water programs. It's been around for about a decade. It covers single-family, multifamily, new and existing products, and is cited in codes and financial incentives in Florida. So that's kind of a model that a lot of people are looking at. And then Water Smart Homes is a metro area program run by the Southern Nevada Water Authority. It's now a performance-based program. However, the scuttlebutt is that now that Nevada passed a WaterSense fixture requirement, the Southern Nevada Water Authority may discontinue the Water Smart Homes program and focus on rebates instead. We're also starting to see some movement with respect to water influencers. So, kind of thinking specifically about builders, we're seeing this on a small, medium, and large builder scale. Certainly, I mentioned Thrive Home Builders, one of our partners in our Vision House program, is just one example of a medium-sized builder that's looking at water efficiency on a community scale. Fortunately, we've got some of the, really leading-edge production builders like Meritage and KB, who really led with respect to energy, also becoming very creative with respect to water. Key markets, kind of a no-brainer: California, Arizona on a state level, Santa Fe, Front Range in Colorado, and Austin. And the messages that are relating as we interact and engage with these builders, as we survey them, is reduced impact fees, lower water meeting sizing, and those lower tap fees. I mentioned that earlier, super important. And then, certainly lower per home water allocation in water restricted areas, which is important just to get those permits, and then ultimately, water conservation as a benefit to home buyers. So fortunately, we have, a lot of ways to solve for these water issues. Situational awareness, we're going to, again, start seeing more of a demand and a requirement for accurate water assessments on a site and a project level. We're seeing more innovative technologies that solve for that situational awareness, that help mitigate water risk, and that help really understand that ongoing monitoring and management. And we're starting to see companies will say, like, for example, in the leak detection and water monitoring space, like Fin and Flow by Moen, really start disseminating some very positive messaging around water. So when we talk with our partners that are in this space, we really do say, look, focus on the positive messaging around water. There's so much doom and gloom out there, right? So the fact that we can be preventative and proactive now in our homes to conserve water and improve quality. We can offer tips for, again, addressing quality and quantity. We have innovative solutions for leak detection, water harvesting, and recycling, et cetera. Certainly protecting homes and families by mitigating leaks, reducing mold and mildew, maintaining, comfort in homes, and then just helping to solve for those water issues on a local, national, and international scale. So just last couple of minutes here before I open it up for questions. I just want to spend a few more minutes talking specifically about cognition. We have specifically crafted cognition to integrate data with insights and innovative media solutions. So, we are clearly generating a tremendous amount of data, turning those data into meaningful and actionable insights and recommendations for our clients, and then working with our clients to then translate all of that into super informed content marketing, custom content generation, and just advertising and media campaigns that we're then able to disseminate through our influencer audience. Cognition is a little unique because it's not just market data, it's not only social listening, it's not just looking at market trends or looking at strategic development, but it's a really wonderful synthesis of all of those things. And fortunately, we've been able to leverage cognition and the power of cognition to help our clients make more informed business decisions, understand market trends, behavioral patterns, purchase drivers, and then again drive relevant content in effective ways through to our influencer audiences, and really to deliver an ROI with KPIs and kind of the end results that our clients are looking for. And we're able to translate cognition again into that informed business intelligence at times when our clients are either developing new marketing campaigns, launching new products, just, understanding business growth decisions, doing customer segmentation, brand comparison, et cetera. We like to say that Cognition provides really optimized budget planning as well, because we're synthesizing data with, media planning and strategic business decisions. So really reducing the amount of time and money that our clients are spending on disparate technology solutions and market reports and even consultants or agencies, and translating that into a really streamlined and sophisticated solution. And so, we'd love to talk with those of you on this call today about how you can unleash the power of cognition, specifically with respect to water. We can help you understand, market trends, growth areas, how we can translate some of this market intelligence into product development, and again, effective marketing campaigns. So please give us a call, shoot us an email. We'd love to show you a more in-depth demo of Cognition and talk about how we might be able to benefit your business with our market intelligence solution. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I again invite you to chat in any questions that you may have. Certainly have just a couple of minutes here, about 7 more minutes, so please shoot your questions over to me. In the meantime, I am going to answer a question about, from Jason. About, he wanted to learn a little bit more about the different water programs. And so what I can say to you, Jason, is that rather than, going into full depth on about the water programs, if you write to me, my email is right there, sarah.gutterman@greenbuildermedia.com. What I can send to you is actually a comprehensive overview that kind of breaks out the different water programs. It's a kind of comparative overview of the different certification programs that kind of goes into a background about each of them. And that's probably the best way to get you the information that you're looking for. So it talks about everything from EPA's Water Sense to the WERS rating, to HERS H2O, and some of those other ones. I've got another question here from Marie about water pricing. Can I talk a little bit more about what's going to happen with respect to water pricing? And that's a great question, because everything is really kind of evolving and developing. We are, as I said, starting to see movement in places. Clearly, we mentioned Santa Fe, we mentioned Las Vegas, we mentioned Austin, we mentioned the Front Range in Colorado, going up into Boulder. And, what we're starting to see actually is that, water pricing historically has not really been appropriate with respect to, the real embodied, we'll say embodied energy and embodied kind of, full cost, we'll say. It hasn't represented the full cost of accessing, filtering, moving, and managing water. And so as municipalities start understanding that in order to encourage water conservation, in order to manage their own infrastructure in places, again, like Flint, but many, many, many other places throughout the entire country, especially, in the East and Midwest, that rely on, much older infrastructure and pipes and systems that inherently have some water pollution problems. We're going to start seeing that municipalities are going to match water pricing with what they're actually paying for water. And those costs will certainly be passed on to builders and developers, and then ultimately to homeowners. So those are all the questions that I have at this time. I'm just going to give you about 30 more seconds if anyone else has any other questions that you want to chat in. All right, so with that, I am going to thank you all so much for attending this webinar. I appreciate your time. Please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to get some more information about water, but also we'd love to show you a cognition demo and talk with you about how you can leverage cognition to make more informed business decisions. Again, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.